Well, welcome as you join us for Going Deeper today. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great message, actually a really challenging message on what it means to be a people of reconciliation in our context.
Yeah.
There's so much in that I think rings true for us as a nation, for us as a community, and for us as a church. I just want to start with, just tell us a little bit about just a background of your engagement with some of these issues that you brought up today and how it has shaped you to the place where you are now.
Yep. Well, there's probably a few things. I'd be going right back to being a kid, the youngest kid by a long way, and so I was the kid that my mum and dad dragged around the country while they were in travelling mode.
Okay.
Right. So, getting to the point where they were retiring and travelling and, had this surprise kid when they thought they'd finished. And so I think travelling in Australia into remote areas in Australia was part of my childhood.
Yep.
And I think that was formative. I think we also had other people within our church context who are involved in Indigenous ministry, and that was formative. Had some Indigenous friends at school. That was formative as well. Although I think it was probably most potent when I was working with Compassion, and not many people are aware of this, but Compassion actually had an Indigenous program in far north Queensland.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
And we'd been looking for quite some time, like what is the appropriate developmental contribution that Compassion could make in the Australian context, recognising that we were doing lots and lots of work overseas, but there were genuine and desperate developmental needs in Australia. And so we had utilised a program that was developed in East Africa during the HIV/AIDS when that was at its peak, child survival program, and it was working on maternal health, infant mortality, and we could see that there were some opportunities in the Indigenous context, working with mums, young families, and young children, and focusing quite specifically, yes, on the health aspect, but also in readiness for school, because we could see that there was just this incredible gap of Indigenous kids being behind the 8 ball in their early schooling years and then just not being able to catch up. And so you had this, quite a deficit in terms of performance at school and staying in school. And so developed this program, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was outstanding. And so that was in Carnarvon Gorge in far north Queensland, and working on that project for a number of years, and it was desperately difficult, very, very difficult project. One of our program guys from Compassion International, he would have been the most experienced program guy globally. He said, this is the most complex developmental environment that Compassion works in globally.
Right here in Australia.
Right here in Australia, more complex than any other context that Compassion worked in.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful partnership between local schools and a local church and the local land council, Indigenous Land Council. And it was in that context that I think for me some of those issues went from here to here.
Yeah.
And recognising that there is significant systemic perpetuating disadvantage in our country, and it's not okay.
And so I think part of the problem, and this would be part of my lived experience, is you hear a little bit about that, but you don't engage with it. You don't see it firsthand. But I remember when you first stepped onto the ministry team, there was a couple of things that God had put on your heart for what we could possibly step into as a church, and one of those was for our Indigenous community right here on the Central Coast.
That's right. Yep.
Even out of this Tumby base, there are a lot of people around us here who would identify as Indigenous and are living in some sort of disadvantage because of that.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about that's right on our doorstep that you're aware of?
So Central Coast Council, so this particular part of the East Coast, like I know that we do have a significant Indigenous population here. Yeah. I think it's one of the things that probably just grieves me a little bit that, you know, on a normal Sunday morning when we would look out on this congregation, it's not representative of the community that we live in.
Yeah, you've said that a few times.
Yeah, and I think that's sad. Mm-hmm. And I don't know exactly what it is that we would need to do to ensure that the environment that we create is welcoming to the spectrum of this community, and that must include our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Yeah. But of course, a lot of the issues that I spoke about, you know, in terms of just the health outcomes and employment rates and school attendance and those sorts of things, they're present here on the coast as well. Like that gap is present here. Okay. It's probably not as present or as marked as in some other parts of the state or in other parts of the country, but it's real. I think it behooves us to be mindful and be aware of that, and to recognise that as ministers of reconciliation, and if I was going to use Old Testament language, I would say ministers of justice. Yes. It's the same idea. Yep. That systemic disadvantage is not okay for us to bear. So where there are people groups who for one reason or another do not enjoy the full fruits of connectedness in community, we've actually got a responsibility in that regard. Yeah, okay. And on one end of that there is that advocacy component, which can be social and political and cultural. But I think at its most basic it is relational.
Yeah, friendship.
How we navigate that and how we forge that, I think that is Holy Spirit territory. Okay. Lord, just bring those friendship opportunities to us. Look for them. Have our ears and hearts open to it.
Yeah, that's good. I love how I've got a coffee for you.
Oh, unreal.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Ta.
I love how you place this issue, which is a very real issue, in the big story of what God's doing in the world, and that the Bible is one big story. Yep. And it's a story of God drawing all things back to himself. And I love how you placed this into that context, because I think for me, and hopefully for others, it gives a sense of the importance of this, but also gives a sense that we're not in this on our own. This is actually God's heart.
It is.
And when we align with God's heart and God's will, you know, that's where Jesus says, you know, ask anything in my name and it will be done for you. Yep. That's in the context of the things you're asking for are part of God's will and heart and design. So I see this fitting in there into that sort of thing beautifully. What could it look like for us as the church, not only Coast Community but the wider church, to really play an active role? Because I love how you said the history of NAIDOC Week came out of an Aboriginal Christian man saying,
that's right.
Can you pray for what's going on with us as a people? Yep. I never knew that. Yep. What would you say about the hopes for the church going forward about being a real mover and shaker in the terms of this stuff?
Well, I think, you know, you go right back to Old Testament Israel. There was something that marked that nation and marked that people group in terms of the way that it would embrace the alien and the outsider. Yes. Always been part of the story.
Their law, wasn't it?
Yep. And that set them apart from other nations. Yes. You know, we would look after the poor, the alien, the outsider, the orphan, the widow. You know, it's always been part of our story. And the ecclesia similarly is the gathering of the people, where the one thing that binds us is our inclusion in the family of God. Yeah. And, you know, you read these New Testament accounts of people gathering in houses and for parties where, you know, you've got the prostitutes and the tax collectors and the, you know, the officials within the temple and poor people and orphans, like everyone's at dinner.
Yeah.
So all of the categories fall away, and what remains is the fact that we are brothers and sisters and that we are adopted into the kingdom. And so I think for us now, it's just not losing sight of that is our story. That's who we are. We are the church. We are the ecclesia. We are the gathering of the sons and daughters and the brothers and sisters, and that knows no other category. So how? And it's a challenge, isn't it? Because everything around us reinforces all of the other categories. The haves and the have-nots, and the powerful and the powerless, and the winners and the losers, and the smart and the dumb, you know. But it is the church as the people that is the only antidote for those categories, because it's disadvantage is a product of categories.
So again, it's about the church being countercultural, isn't it?
Yes.
Because too often
kingdom cultural.
Yeah, too often we as the people in the church are dominated more by the culture around us rather than kingdom culture.
Yep.
You're right.
That's right. And one of the perfect ways that the enemy loves to do that is in doctrine and dogma.
Yes.
And so if we just keep the church separated, then everything else is separated as well.
Yep. Yeah, good point. So on a practical level, we'll finish with this. I felt a bit of a challenge and issued a bit of a challenge at the end, just to go, what are we going to do about this week? What could it look like to step into initiating friendship or reconciling a friendship? What would be something practical that you and I, but others watching, could actually do this week that helps us take at least a step forward in the right direction of where we were going today?
Yep. A couple of things. And I reckon one of the first one is, so it is NAIDOC week. There's lots of information that will be coming out this week. And I think the first is just don't be ignorant. You know, don't push it aside. So this week, just go, all right, I'm going to engage. If my normal posture might have been to, you know, kind of push that noise aside, I'm actually going to be educated because I know what's going on here is a fractured relationship between people groups, and as a kingdom citizen, I cannot abide that. You know, I'm a person of oneness, of unity, of reconciliation. I know that that's our destiny, and I'm going to be an agent of that destiny. And the first thing is that I need to have my eyes open to the brokenness. Yep. So don't let it just go through to the keeper. Yep. So have your eyes open to the brokenness, pay attention, be educated, and then in that to be praying in an informed way. You know, this is where lament comes in, where crying out to God comes in. Lord, I see the brokenness. I see where this reality does not line up with your kingdom promises. Let your kingdom come and let me be a part of its coming. You know, ask that the Holy Spirit would bring across our paths opportunity to just be an agent of reconciling friendship.
Yeah, good.
You know, and it may be that as we hold ourselves open with a genuine invitation, how wonderful would it be if very authentically, very naturally, that those kind of friendships were forged right here in this community, and we saw that over time that our Indigenous brothers and sisters were genuinely a part of our fellowship. Yeah. But I think we need to be the first movers in that.
Yeah, good.
In that regard. Yep.
So for our home groups who will check this out, can I encourage you to keep this conversation going, to take some of Jeff's advice on what it means to step into that, to do it, to share that with one another, encourage one another, be accountable to one another in that. I think this has been a really timely message for us as the church, for us as a nation. And one of those messages that, again, I think won't just go through to the keeper, but there'll be some stickiness. That my prayer is that stuff will stick out of this for us as a community. So thanks for joining us as we went deeper today.
Yep.
Thank you again, Jeff, and we look forward to joining you next week when we kick off a brand new series, when you'll find out more about that then.
Yep.
See you next time.